Good morning. In the beginning, there were two separate women's groups in the United Church of Canada. The Women's Missionary Society, WMS, had its own network of branches and national board. It was a world mission-oriented service and study group that supported almost 100 active missionaries around the world, demonstrating the significant, albeit often overlooked, contribution of women in the church. The Women's Association, or WA at that time, focused on the work in the local church and community. Guilds and ladies' aids were the WA's forerunners. In the even earlier years, these units went unrecorded, just doing what was needed to be done, spiritually, financially, and socially. In 1953, the United Church General Council established a committee to study women's work in the church, with the goal of formally recognizing the work and contribution of United Church women. In 1956, a commission on the work of women in the church was initiated. Its findings and recommendations were released in 1960. And finally, in 1962, the WMS and WA officially came together to form the United Church Women, or UCW. Any woman willing to contribute her prayers, gifts, and services for the work of the church may join the UCW. Former moderator Jordan Cantwell called United Church Women the hands and feet of the church. Today, we'll take a look at Walton's UCW to see how much has changed over the years.
Back in the day, Walton had both a women's missionary society and a women's association. When we took a deep dive into Walton's archives, we were unsuccessful in finding records of these groups. But instead, we came across the handwritten minutes and financial reports of the COC, beginning in November of 1936. Have any of you heard of the COC here at Walton? Only one person. Well, we hadn't either. So, what was the COC, we wondered, and how does it connect with the UCW? Well, apparently, the senior girls' Sunday school class wished to continue getting together even though they'd aged out of Sunday school. So their teacher, Mrs. Davis, and the minister helped them organize the Carry On Bible class, later just the Carry On class, or COC. 6 young ladies, Mrs. Davis and Mrs. Heslop, met for a social evening on December 17th at the home of 2 of the girls. But by year's end, the COC was already contributing to the upkeep of the church and beyond by giving $25 for classroom repairs and paying $10.81 to missions. With Mrs. Davis's continued guidance and the encouraging support of several other women, the COC met 2 or 3 times each month. Brief entries note the formal proposition of and voting on projects, one of the first of which was to mount a play. Committees were formed to efficiently accomplish such aspects as selling candy at the 2 performances in March 1937 of Sis Perkins at the public school, for which they paid a rent of $8. The candy sale brought in $7.52 to help offset the cost. Ticket sales raised $50.30. In April, they voted unanimously to donate their $1 of mission money, quote, for ministers receiving less than a minimum salary. In November that year, they purchased a heater for their classroom for the huge sum of $2.63. That was the cheaper of the two. The other one was $4 and something. At the December 4th bazaar run by the church women, the COC candy sale again brought in $7.52, which they immediately donated to the Ladies' Aid. In 1941, their rummage sale yielded $28.15, $28 of which went into war savings certificates, and the rest towards half a pound of coffee, which cost 18 cents. Never again, Nicole. Treasurer's reports continue, including records of a monthly individual fee of 5 cents. But there's a 4-year gap in recorded minutes from 1938 until late 1942.
By 1943, fuller records of monthly meetings detail devotions, including hymns, scripture readings, and more, as well as any projects planned or on hand. Attendance was in the teens. The March entry mentions knitting socks for the War Service League. Then in January 1944, with the members now well into their 20s, there was a discussion about changing the group's name. Thus, that February, the Carry On class became the Carry On Club. It took on the baby table at the annual bazaar held on the first Saturday in December and donated $10 to Ladies' Aid and $10 to missions, as it continued to do for many years. In 1945, an article entitled "Friendship Through Rationing" was discussed and a quilt made. In 1946, the group participated in the World Day of Prayer, and a 10-year anniversary celebration was held that November, with 28 women in attendance. In 1948, fees doubled to $0.10 a month, yielding $1 a year by each member from 10 meetings, whether attended or not. Almost 40 members were on the register, most of them now married. In February, they catered a banquet for the men's club that raised $68, less $30 in expenses. That May, Mrs. Bumby moved that $100 be set aside for a reserve fund to be used only for church furnishings. October minutes show that the COC now thought of itself as a junior WA and was anxious to help them in any way that they see fit. Certainly, their activities hint at this, as in 1949, at least 3 bake sales were held.
And so, through the 50s and onwards, besides continuing to enjoy games and quizzes and a great variety of entertainment by spoken word, music, and invited speakers at their meetings, the group raised funds for items and causes both within and beyond the church, often through those rummage and bake sales. At various times, it sponsored a junior choir and supported explorers and CGIT groups. It contributed generously to the building fund and for years to the parsonage fund, buying material for and making curtains, purchasing furniture, painting and decorating rooms. Spring bazaars were held, called cotton carnivals, as 100 new bleached cotton flour bags were purchased, with which members made and sold all manner of useful and decorative items to sell. old Christmas cards were sent to a missionary in Jamaica. About 20 orphaned girls, aged 8 to 15, at the Cedarvale School in Georgetown, each received a Christmas present for a couple of years or more. In fact, by February 1962, when these records cease and the UCW designation in the United Church became official, the Carry On Club had become the evening unit of the UCW, continuing to meet mostly in members' homes and occasionally at the church. Frida Hall, who was treasurer for years and still comes to our meetings, started attending in 1963, and Shirley Walmsley had already taken a term as president.
We could fill another hour and still barely scratch the surface of what was accomplished by the UCW 60 years ago. But what do we get up to today? Well, the Christmas Bazaar morphed into the Cookie Walk, and now the Cookie Sale, expanded but still held on the first Saturday in December, with the majority of its earnings going to Walton's General Fund. We've added a muffin sale to benefit the Fair Share Food Bank, as anyone who was here last Sunday knows. Monthly meeting donations are entirely optional, but most members contribute $5, which brings in about $150 each time. There are few expenses, so this goes mainly to support some chosen charities and worthy causes, such as Sleeping Children Around the World overseas and Kerr Street Mission locally. When our members were asked why they joined Walton's UCW and what they liked most about it, many mentioned camaraderie, companionship, and community. After all, what's not to like about coffee and cookies with good conversation? They like it that there's a different theme each month with an interesting or instructive guest or in-house speaker, often on health-related issues, or an activity such as the book and puzzle swap, a discussion, some more serious and soul-searching than others, a quiz, game, or even a recipe swap, or mud ball making in support of endangered monarch butterflies. They also appreciate working together to accomplish activities that eventually benefit us and others, like making the savory snacks in the kitchen for the cookie sale. Speaking of the kitchen, the UCW has traditionally supplied many of its needs, both concrete and consumable. We still ask what Walton needs most at any given time, and more recently have supplied such items as a laptop, external DVD player, wireless mouse and laser pointer for Bronte Hall, as well as just boosting the general fund.
So, what's changed over the years? In a nutshell, nothing much. At one point, when their numbers grew to approximately 30, the COC split into 4 smaller house groups for some activities. Now we always meet in Bronte Hall, as we couldn't possibly expect anyone to host at home the approximately 33 or 75% of our 44 active members who gather monthly, except in July and August. It seems the original WA became the afternoon unit of the UCW, as back then married women were less likely to have paid work outside the home. Now we are mostly retired women who are free to meet in the afternoon, and we are very appreciative of the support we receive from Walton's younger working cohort, that is the fruit of the vine. This is the story of Walton's UCW, and we are blessed by all those from other UCWs who join us, bringing their rich experiences from their former groups and congregations, and so enriching our meetings and programs. Whatever your age, those who attend Walton's current UCW would like you to know that we are a welcoming bunch that invites any woman to join us who is willing to contribute her prayers, gifts, and services for the work of the church, and looking to find faith, friends, fellowship, and fun, along with some fundraising. So on the second Thursday of the month, from 1:30 to 3-ish in Bronte Hall, you'll continue to find coffee, cookies, and congenial company. We offer gratitude to God for guidance to the women of Walton over the past century, and continue to look to God for opportunities, inspiration, and direction in the future. Praise be to God. And if you'd like to learn more about the Carry On Club, come to our next meeting on April 10th.
I've entitled my words today, 100 Thank Yous, and they aren't enough. 2025 is a double celebration for Walton. Of course, 100 years of the United Church of Canada, which, like the UCW, was a union. The Methodist Church, the Congregational Church, the majority of the Presbyterian churches joined in 1925. Now, Walton predates the United Church. Walton predates Canada. 1850 on this site. So it's our 175th anniversary. So we are, throughout the year as a congregation, celebrating both anniversaries. And we thought we would take this Sunday to say 100 thank yous to the UCW. As we heard, the UCW was created in the early 60s, and some of you may remember that. Now, Walton is full of people from other congregations, other religious traditions, or no religious traditions, but some of those from other United Churches have an exposure and experience in their UCWs, which they bring and add to the richness of Walton. There are those two elements inherent in the UCW. What we would call study, worship, reflection, but also the service, just the plain hard work, the fundraising. And they come together from the two largest groups that created the UCW to create what we have today. Now, Jesus talks about doing good deeds in secret. And that is wise advice. Not letting the left hand know what the right hand is doing. He tells the story of the widow's mite. And this person who came and put an offering in, who had much in the treasury in the temple and made a big deal of it. Trumpets and great attention. Today, they would be all over social media with their contribution. But that person gave out of their abundance. Jesus sees the widow's mite or the widow's offering, and she gave out of what little she had, out of her poverty. And her offering, in Jesus' sense, was the greatest of all. Now, in the presentation that Ann and Rachel did, it talks about how one of the former moderators says that the UCW is the hands and feet of Jesus. I totally concur. UCW does so much. And we don't see it in the headlines, if you will. And it's not just about the muffins that were sold and the muffins that are going to be sold next Sunday, but it's the people that will be fed in Oakville because of that muffin sale. It is that community. I was thinking about how they were talking about fun through rationing. Did you pick up on that during the war years? They looked at an article about fun during rationing. Not something that most of us have known, except maybe for toilet paper. But it was serious business. And imagine the role that that community of women played with those who had partners, who had children overseas for 3 or 4 or 5 years during the war years, the Second World War especially. You can think today you can have instant communication with anyone in the field anywhere. But the letters were far between. Or they had family members in a POW camp. Or they had family members buried in a cemetery. And the support of that group of women, how critical it is to get through those years. And in different ways, that continues today. My office adjoins Bronny Hall, if you're not aware, and even though we put soundproofing in, which we really appreciate, and when the UCW meets and I hear all that talking, and I put my headphones on so I can concentrate, it's wonderful. That's what it's all about. That community. And the meeting ends, and people talk and talk and visit and visit and visit and visit. And we have yoga coming in at 6 o'clock. But that's what it's all about. It's that relationship. And it's not just face-to-face. People pick up the phone. People go and visit. Some members of the UCW who physically cannot get here like they did. And it's right to say that every month, every member of the UCW is contacted. Correct? That is huge. That reaching out. And, you know, it gives us feedback that things that staff or other committees need to follow. The other 100 thank yous I would have is that the members of the UCW are not just limited to this group. There's members of the UCW who serve on the council of this church, who serve on the committees of this church, who are in the choir, who are involved in our other programs, in our health and wellness. The hands and feet of Jesus. Today we say thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.